what's going on, everybody? This is another episode of the Ear to the Canvas podcast. I am your host, Ryan Truland. We had more fights this weekend with Curtis Blaydes and Alexander Volkov in the main event. For anybody who did watch it, I'm sure if you're just a casual fan, you were probably pretty bored watching that fight. It was just wrestling. Curtis Blaydes, not a ton of damage. He wasn't able to do a ton of damage, ton of ground and pound once he got the takedowns, but the takedowns just kept coming, and Volkov, both guys were exhausted, you could tell. Wrestling just wears you down more than really any other mixed martial art. But the co-main event was a fight that I hope a lot of people were able to see. That's going to be one of the best fights of the year. It was a featherweight fight with Josh Emmett, Shane Burgos. Last week I did the first segment of Contender, Pretender. That was with the bantamweights, but I previewed this Blaydes Volkov card, and I was talking about Josh Emmett, how he's a featherweight, and I used him as an example of somebody who was definitely a fringe guy as being a contender or pretender in the featherweight division. But that performance against Burgos, who, by the way, Burgos did not lose any stock in that loss. That's one of those defeats where you just don't lose momentum, really. Of course, he didn't get the win, but he showed insane toughness, and he was trading with Josh Emmett. He did a good job in the pocket. He was taking more of the damage, obviously. Josh Emmett definitely agree with the decision. He won the fight. And we're going to do Contender, Pretender in a little bit with the featherweights. And Josh Emmett, let's just say he's not a fringe guy anymore after that performance. He said it himself. He wants to fight somebody ranked ahead of him. And we're going to get into that couple hypotheticals with who he could be fighting next in a little bit. I just wanted to let everybody know that Ear to the Canvas, though, can be found on Spotify now, which I'm very excited about. So you can go just search Ear to the Canvas on Spotify or YouTube now, and you can listen to it. Gonna be having guests on next week, not this week, but next week. I will be a guest on a podcast called MMA Reloaded. It's based out of London in England. That'll be tomorrow. It'll probably be up on YouTube late evening Eastern time, or late afternoon rather, Eastern time. So check that out. So yeah, let's get into what happened on Saturday. Gonna go through the main card. Gonna start off with the first fight on the main card and work our way up to the main event. First fight on the main card, this was a very intriguing matchup. Previewed it going into it. It was Jim Miller versus Roosevelt Roberts. You have Jim Miller, who I went through last week, all the guys he's fought. He's been around forever. He's been in the Octagon more than anybody else. He's been in the UFC Octagon more than anybody else in history. I should say nobody else has been in the Octagon more than him, because I believe him and Cowboy Cerrone are now tied for most appearances. And it was a weird fight. It was kind of a fluke in a way. Roosevelt threw a kick that got partially caught, and he ended up on his back really as soon as the fight started. And that's not where Roosevelt wants to be. They were both dry. Obviously, the fight just started, and he didn't get up. Jim Miller ended up working to that armbar submission, and you heard the verbal tap from Roberts. So that was obviously a big step up in competition, just because it's hard to fight a guy who's such a seasoned veteran like Jim Miller is. And for a young guy like Roberts, I don't think he should hang his head on that performance. Like I said, I think it was kind of a fluke. You don't expect, I'm sure, thinking about the fight over and over, like he probably did leading up to it, Roosevelt. I'm sure he didn't envision himself in any of those where he would be on his back within 5 seconds with Jim Miller on top and working towards submissions. Jim Miller said that he was just waiting for Roosevelt to make a mistake, and Roberts let go of he was trying to control Jim Miller's hands so he couldn't get 2-on-1, and as soon as he went to throw a strike, Roberts, Jim Miller said to himself, he said in the post-fight interview that if Roosevelt does that again, like he's going to be ready for that armbar submission. And then there you have it. Roosevelt threw another strike, try and soften Jim Miller up, and Jim Miller locked in the armbar. Like I said, Roosevelt, do not hang your head. Jim Miller's a tough son of a bitch, and it's just a fluke. He's still got a great record, great things to come, I'm sure. Going on to the second fight that really stood out on the main card, it was Belal Muhammad versus Lymangood. Going into it, I said that the longer the fight went, the more it benefits Muhammad, that Lyman is going to come out swinging, looking to take his head off, and he might gas out. Not really how it happened, though. Muhammad did get the win, and it did go the distance, but it didn't really favor him towards the end, because that third round, you saw, God, it was not easy for Muhammad to survive. But he did. He willed himself, and showed incredible heart, and Lymangood is not an easy guy to fight, by any means. Muhammad is on a pretty good streak right now. I think he's won 7 out of his last 8. And he wants a ranked guy in his next fight, and I agree with him. He's a welterweight in the 170-pound division. It's one of the best divisions, talent-wise, in the world right now. And Muhammad's not ranked. The rankings aren't out just yet. I don't think he will be ranked once they update the rankings, because you got Neil Magny at 15, Anthony Pettis at 14, Luque at 13, Robbie Lawler at 12. I think that's pretty much how it'll keep. If I had to guess, I don't think Muhammad will be ranked, but when you look at the guys, a ranked guy is what he deserves in his next fight. I'm looking at Neil Magny, honestly, at 15, who's coming off that win over Anthony Rocco Martin not too long ago. I think that would be a good ranked guy for Muhammad. That would be a good fight, too. Stylistically, it's going to be a stand-up fight, more than likely. And it's going to be a technical fight. It's not a ton of... Neither guy has a ton of power for that division. It's not like they have, that Woodley power at 170 or Robbie Lawler power at 170. Neither guy has that. They're more technical. They're more pick you apart as the fight goes on, outpoint you. I think that'll be a good fight to watch, though. Belal Muhammad versus Neil Magny. I don't think they'll give him Pettis. Pettis, I don't know what he's up to. He's calling out like Anderson Silva. I don't think they're going to do that fight, but I do think Pettis wants like a bigger name than Belal Muhammad in his next fight. Luque, Muhammad has lost to Luque earlier in his career, so maybe he wouldn't mind trying to avenge that loss. So Luque or Neil Magny, I think, is probably next for Belal Muhammad. Guy definitely deserves a ranked opponent. Interesting, though, he called out Santiago Ponzinibbio, who's actually not ranked because the guy hasn't fought, like Muhammad said, in 25 years, it seems. He's Argentinian, once thought of, still kind of is, as a contender in that welterweight division. But again, the guy hasn't fought in forever. Muhammad called him out. That's interesting. That'll be a huge win for Muhammad if he can get that fight and then beat Ponzinibbio. So yeah, that's a possibility too. Magny, Luque, or Ponzinibbio next for Muhammad, I think. Moving ahead, let's go to the best fight of the night. One of the fights of the year, gonna probably be. It's Josh Emmett and Shane Burgos at featherweight. Going into it, Josh was the 8th ranked featherweight, where Burgos was 10. Very good matchup on paper. Going into a lot of people who really watch the sport were trying to hype it up, knowing that these guys were just gonna stand and bang in the middle in a phone booth until one guy goes down. Neither guy did go down. Which kind of just amplified the fight. They just kept standing, kept coming forward. It was awesome. And Josh Emmett came out on top. I agree with the decision. He won that fight. He is very animate about wanting to fight a guy ranked higher than him. And he's done being a gatekeeper. He was very animate about that. So I've been looking at the featherweight rankings, trying to find an opponent ranked ahead of him. And it's been tough because you got Frankie Edgar right ahead of him. He's going down to bantamweight, so you can imagine Josh is probably going to move up to 7 from 8. I don't see him jumping Calvin Kattar. Why would he, honestly, with Kattar's performance? Burgos, I don't think will move much. He might drop like 1. He might flip with EJ. But again, Josh Emmett, looking at possible opponents ahead of him. The only and the best scenario, I think, the best, most likely scenario would be the winner of Calvin Kattar and Dan EJ next up to fight Josh Emmett. They're expected to fight next month in July. Kattar coming off that impressive win over Jeremy Stevens. EJ coming off that close win over Edson Barbosa. Either one will have a lot of momentum, whoever wins this fight coming out of it. And especially if Kattar wins this fight, Josh Emmett should be chomping at the bit to get it in there with Calvin Kattar. Because that would be a huge win if he could pull that off. And he'll be right there in featherweight contention. So yeah, the winner of Calvin Kattar and Dan EJ, I think, is probably next for Josh Emmett. That's what makes the most sense. Everybody else is kind of booked. I hear that Yair is probably going to fight Zabit, which is a sick fight. Ortega is fighting Korean Zombie, and then obviously Match is fighting Volkanovski. That's everybody ahead of Emmett, besides Edgar, who's leaving the division for bantamweight. Other guys below him he doesn't want, he said. None of them really made sense. So yeah, winner of Kattar and EJ is next for Emmett. I'm almost certain, looking at the rankings. Then you look at Burgos. I said it before, he did not lose any stock in defeat. He really won't drop far in the rankings, 1 if he does at all. So, he's a tough fighter, man. Very tough to put away, almost impossible, as you saw with that fight Saturday. So, you gotta watch his next fight. They'll pin him up against somebody in the top 15 again, obviously, and definitely worth watching, worth keeping an eye on Shane Burgos. So, main event came, and it went 25 minutes. It was a 25-minute wrestling match for the most part. Curtis Blaydes warned everybody going into it that if you're not a fan of wrestling, you probably shouldn't be watching his fight. He was also talking a lot of trash over this week. He was very confident. Dana White criticized his confidence over the week and his trash talking, and he said that he looked pretty stupid with the way that he performed after talking all that shit. I don't know if he looked stupid. I think the worst look for Blaydes was honestly that post-fight interview. I've never seen somebody so tired in a post-fight interview before. It's kind of crazy. I know he went 25 minutes of just wrestling a tough guy like Volkov. I know I would be, if I fought for 25 minutes, I'd be more out of breath than he was, but I've never seen somebody that out of breath in the UFC in a post-fight interview. As for his performance, though, I don't think it was a bad performance from Blaydes. He did what he was going to do. The only thing is, he had really not much issue at all taking Volkov down. He just didn't do much once he did take him down, you know? There just wasn't a ton of damage from the ground and pound aspect. And obviously he didn't want to stand with Volkov really at all. There was a few moments where he was like just kind of dancing with them, testing the waters on the feet, but it was pretty much all on the ground, and Volkov really had a tough time stopping the takedowns. Once Blaydes started getting tired, he had a little more success. But it was most of the same story for the 25 minutes. So, Blaydes will not get a title shot like he wants in his next fight. There's just no way it's happening. Alright, let me just take a quick break to tell you guys about our sponsor, Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's an app available to download on your computer, iPhone, or Android, and it's the easiest way to make a podcast. For starters, it's free. Everything's free on Anchor, and it gives you all kinds of tools that allow you to record and edit and create your very own podcast right from your computer or phone. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, man, how do I get my podcast out to the people? Well, Anchor even distributes your podcast on all the biggest platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can even profit from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Go download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. If he had KO'd Volkov in like the first or second round or something, or just dominated him and inflicted a shitload of damage or something, still wouldn't be enough because he's lost to Ngannou, and Ngannou deserves the next shot. He's calling himself the uncrowned champ, and I don't know about that, but he's certainly next. He's definitely going to get the next opportunity. So where does that leave Curtis Razor Blaydes? Guy who has an impressive resume, coming off a win over Volkov. Where do you go with him? There's two options, and I think he's got to wait a couple months, which I don't think he has a problem with. I think you wait, if you're Blaydes, for the winner of the Derek Lewis and Oleinik fight, which is in early August. The winner of that, or the winner of Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. They're scheduled to fight in August. So either of those fights, if Blaydes fights the winner, I think that made sense. Volkov is obviously got to go back to the drawing board a little. I don't think he's going to want to fight a wrestler like Walt Harris or something in his next fight. I don't see that. I see him fighting somebody like Augusto Sakai, who's on a pretty nice winning streak right now, up-and-comer in the heavyweight division. He's right now ranked 10th. Or he could fight Shamil Abdurakhimov. One of those two guys I think would make sense for Volkov. Fight somebody where the fight's going to be more on the feet, so he can display his, reach and striking, which he likes to do. He doesn't really want to be on the ground. So that's what's next for those two guys who fought in the main event. Let's real quick the heavyweight division, since I mentioned it. DC and Stipe are scheduled to fight UFC 252 in August. That's happening in Vegas. DC has said it over and over that this will be his last fight, win or lose. So I was thinking hypotheticals. If DC wins, gets the heavyweight belt from Stipe, retires, the heavyweight belt is vacant at that point. Obviously, Ngannou steps in. Who's Ngannou fight? Does that open the door up for Blaydes? That doesn't scream heavyweight title fight entertainment to me, honestly. John Jones, maybe. What if they make that happen? Vacant heavyweight belt. They won't. I don't think they'll give Stipe the immediate rematch. They could against Ngannou. They could have them fight for the vacant belt, but I think you get two fresh blood, two fresh faces in there. If DC wins and retires and vacates it, I think you get John Jones and Ngannou in there. And if Stipe wins, DC retires, Stipe versus Ngannou, you got to do it. Ngannou's just a better fighter than he was the first time he fought Stipe, so I know like sometimes you get a matchup where it's already happened and the guy's still a contender though, the guy that lost, still the same champion, and you're like, do you want to see that fight again? Or do you reach down farther in the rankings for a fresh face? But I think Ngannou's resume just cannot be denied, and his improvement can't be denied, and I think he gets another shot no matter who wins, Stipe or DC. If DC wins, though, it opens the door for some more interesting possibilities, like the John Jones versus Ngannou match, if DC wins. So yeah, very big implications coming up in the heavyweight division, and there were some this past Saturday with Blaydes. So that was Saturday's card. Wanted to now move forward. We had a featured featherweight fight in the co-main event. I wanted to move ahead to Contender, Pretender, Part 2 with the featherweights. Now the featherweight division really though, the bantamweight's deep, featherweight's deep, lightweight's deep, welterweight's deep. All those divisions are incredibly deep right now. So featherweight, you look at 15, Sadiq Yusuf. That's a tough call. I like Sadiq a lot. He's beaten some good dudes. He's fought some good dudes already. I hate to do it, but it almost is too early to tell. It really is with Sadiq. The guy's young. He's still 27. Very young as a fighter, too. He's only fought 4 times in the UFC since earning the contract on the Contender series. All wins, too. All wins. He beat Andre Fili in the decision. He's got a building resume, and it's interesting to see what he's going to do next. I'm going to hold off on saying contender or pretender with Yusuf. Going to Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall is ranked 14 in the featherweight division right now. Ryan Hall, he presents a very unique skill set for the UFC. He wants to get that thing to the ground as soon as he can. He'll pull guard. He'll go right to his back. He doesn't care. He wants to get that thing to the ground. He'll put you in a leg lock. He'll knee bar you, ankle lock, anything. This guy can win from anywhere on the ground. Is he a contender? Is he a pretender? I don't think he's a contender in the featherweight division just because of how deep the division is, how tough the division is. He's training at TriStar right now, which is interesting. I like that. He's at 14, but you look at all those guys ahead of him in this division. I've got to put him at pretender right now. Moving ahead, you got Jose Aldo at 13. I did him as a contender in the bantamweight division, obviously, because you kind of have to since he's fighting for the belt. I'm going to just not, since I did him at bantamweight, I'm not going to do him here at featherweight. He's a contender right now. He's fighting for the belt. And you got Arnold Allen at 12. A lot of people, Arnold Allen is probably the least talked about ranked guy in the featherweight division right now. I would say I don't hear much about Arnold Allen. He's beaten Nick Lentz, Gabriel Melendez, which is fellow opponent that Yusuf beat. Arnold Allen's got an impressive record too. He's 16-1. He's similar to Sadiq, where it's too early to tell. See, with the bantamweight division, it was a little easier because you got guys who you've seen fight a bunch there from like 15 to 11. Really, all of them. You got guys who you've seen fight a bunch. Arnold Allen, haven't seen enough from him yet. Same with Sadiq. Or I can't label him yet. Ryan Hall, I've seen enough to know his skill set. I think he has to get better on the feet if he wants to be a contender at 145. So I'm going to move ahead to 11 with Dan Ige. I put out an article over the weekend. It was the dark horses of each division. I had Ige as my dark horse at 145. That's because I think he is a contender in that division. He stood in there for 15 strong minutes with Edson Barbosa, who is frightening to be across from in the octagon for anybody. And he traded with him. It was largely on the feet. He took shots. He gave shots. He ended up pulling out that decision victory. I only watched the fight once live when it happened. I had Barboza winning, but I could be wrong. I know a lot of people did. Still, though, Ige has a big test coming up against Calvin Kattar. And Ige, with a win, is going to fly up those rankings. I could see him fighting Josh Emmett after that. And it's going to become hard to deny his resume if he does pull out another win or two against these top guys like Kattar and then Josh Emmett. I have him as a contender. I don't think he's a pretender in that division. I think he has what it takes to make his way up the rankings into contendership. I don't know how long it will take, but I do think he has what it takes at 145. Shane Burgos at 10. Shane Burgos at 10. I think that was his second loss only in his career against Emmett this past Saturday. Again, you can't trash him for that loss. You just can't. I'm gonna say it's so tough. Shane Burgos is tough. This featherweight division's been tough with these contender or pretenders. It really has. I'm gonna say contender though. I like Shane Burgos a lot. I think if he cleans some stuff up, if he learns how to not get hit as much and still be able to connect on his shots, as he does take some damage. Obviously, you saw that on Saturday. But he can inflict damage. If he gets a little more clean on the feet, I think he can be a contender. Gonna move up to number 9, Jeremy Stephens. I'm gonna say pretender with Jeremy. He had his time. He's older now. He's coming off that loss to Cater. He can beat a lot of these guys in the top 15, obviously. There's no doubt Jeremy Stephens is still a heathen. But he's tough. He's got power. I just don't see him beating the guys ahead of him. So I'm going to say pretender. Josh Emmett, contender. Saturday is what I needed to see from him, and he delivered. I got to say contender for Josh Emmett right now. He's going to have a big fight. Biggest fight of his career will be his next fight. And with a win, he's right there with guys like Yair, Korean Zombie, maybe even ahead of Yair in that 145 title conversation. I got to have Josh at contender. So Frankie Yeager, I don't think I lumped him in with the bantamweights, even though he's fighting at bantamweight. I think he's a contender no matter which division he fights in. He's going to get the big fights. He's Frankie Yeager. And he can beat anybody. He's still training hard. I know that. He's got this fight coming up with Pedro Munoz at bantamweight. If he wins that, he's right in there with the top 5 bantamweights. So, contender for Frankie. Everybody else in the featherweight division is a contender. Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Korean Zombie, Zabit, Brian Ortega, Matt Holloway, and then you got Volkanovski. All those guys are contenders. Let's go back real quick. Sadiq Yusuff, too early to tell. Ryan Hall, got him pretender. Jose Aldo, did him with the bantamweights as a contender. Arnold Allen, too early to tell. EJ, contender. Burgos, contender. Stephens, pretender. Everybody else are contenders. What a division. Featherweight, what a division. And it's going to be, the end of 2020 is going to be very exciting for that featherweight division too, because we got a lot of big fights towards the top. Obviously, with the title fight next month. So yeah, that was contender, pretender with the featherweights. I want to end with this real quick. Dana White has been saying, in response to the possible Amanda Nunes thinking about retiring talk, he's made it clear that he is signing new female talent, new women's talent to the UFC from other organizations. He started that, I think it was a couple weeks ago with Miranda Maverick. Might have even been more recent. All Invicta FC fighters. Yin Yu Frey and Kay Hansen. 3 female UFC fighters from Invicta, or female MMA fighters from Invicta, now signed to the UFC. Miranda Maverick has fought, let's see what she usually fights at. She usually fights at flyweight. Frey is usually an bantamweight, so she'll obviously be coming up to strawweight, you would think. And then Hansen is a strawweight. They're actually fighting. That's right. Hansen and Frey are fighting, matching up with each other for their UFC debuts. That's pretty exciting. So yeah, they're trying to restock the women's divisions, get more talent, and I think that's a good idea. This Saturday, hell of a UFC main event for the fight night. One of the best fight night main events of the year. Can't wait. Poirier Hooker, gonna get into it later in the week. So thank you for sticking with me through this 28 minutes, 29 minutes. I don't want to waste any more of your time. I appreciate you all for listening. Gonna have another episode out later this week. Remember, MMA Reloaded guest appearance I'll be on his podcast tomorrow. Check that out. Ears to the Canvas. See you Thursday.